Greetings, class. For this installment, we're going to address the question, what do you do if they won't play? And again, we'll be looking at primarily what our text getting to yes has to say about this. Uh, from this edition, it starts dealing with it on page 109. Um, they offer us several different ways to begin approaching this. This idea of they won't play. We're in a negotiation. We're willing to work with the other party. It seems like the other party is not budging. They're not coming up with alternative solutions. They're stuck on a price. If that it's negotiation on price, but on a position, they're not budging. They won't play. So what can you do? And so our authors tell us fundamentally that there's three strategic ways to approach this. We start by looking at the what can you do, right? What can you do? What parts are you in control over? Um, what can they do? An examination of what the other party's position is. And then the third step is a look at what can a third party do. And so let me just start by breaking down each of those a little bit into its pieces. The other side's not playing. Focus on what the other side's doing might have us into this impasse. But what can you do? What freedom do you have? What are your options? In our previous clips, we've looked at BATNA and WATNA. That's the best alternative to the negotiated agreement and the worst alternative to the negotiated agreement, which are key features of the getting to yes methodology, right? So we want to resolve the problem. What can we do, right? So if the other person's not budging, right, clearly you're sticking around for a reason. I don't want to assume that that reason's the same in all cases. There might be questions about opportunity costs or prior relationships or future relationships or reasons why you would like to work with the other party. Perhaps you're related, right? There's a lot of flexibility on what the other party might be, but in any of those cases, there's got to be a look and an internal examination. What can you do? Can you take a loss, right? Does your WATNA tell you that it's going to hurt, right? You're going to feel the pain. You're going to feel the pinch that this isn't going to work if you don't reach an agreement here. What's your flexibility? What are the options? Right? They're not playing. Okay, but how workable in your metric of what you're hoping for is it, right? If it's completely out of the range of what you're able to do, they're not budging. You may have to also come to the conclusion where you might have to walk away. Some relationships you can walk away from, some transactions you can walk away from, others you can't. But you really do need to take a look at what can you do, right? How bad do you need this? If you need it really bad and the other side knows you need it really bad, they don't have a whole lot of basis for being flexible. They also might think that they have you right where they want you, kind of, that they're going to be able to get all their demands met, and they might be mistaken, in which case we're thinking about what they may do. So lots of times in negotiation, one person sees the other side potentially as bluffing or being inflexible, and we assign the wrong either personal characteristics or the wrong kind of strategic thinking about what that means. So sometimes people are actually being inflexible, and it's because they think that they're actually making a very honest and fair offer. They believe that what they're presenting is reasonable, and they don't see it otherwise. Frequently, people have an idea about value and worth. They have come up with their own calculus for that. And there's nothing dishonest or deceptive about that. And so if the assumption, right, this is one of the keys that they're offering. If the other side isn't playing, one of the strategies is to assume that they're making an honest effort at resolving the problem, at problem solving. Uh, and so what may they do? Well, the same as you may walk away if it's not going somewhere. Then you have the part where you might push the other party away, and sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's not okay, right? So again, there's that part of the calculus, and that relates to the BATNA and the WATNA. If you are seeing another party in conflict and in negotiation, and they're not budging on their position, and you're not budging on yours, maybe you can't, right? There are lots of times where there isn't room for you to move. The most you're able to do is simply the most you're able to do, and if that's not good for the other party, what happens? And if the other party is not coming down, it might really be that they're bound in some way that's either known or unknown to you. There's nothing that requires complete transparency in a negotiation. In fact, lots of times people feel like holding back is better for them, because if they know, or if you know all the information, then you can take advantage of maybe their weaknesses or something, right? But they may walk away. They may what, right? They might find another customer. They might find a different working relationship for this. It might not be the case that they might find a new sibling or a new parent or something, if that's the kind of conflict that we're dealing with. But there are lots of different features of not getting what you want, where actually the alternatives may actually be even worse than just not getting what you want, but like having a negative impact on a relationship. What might you do? What might they do? The third thing here, right, is what might a third party be able to do? Frequently, it's the case that two parties can't resolve a conflict together, but with the help of a third party, a trained negotiator, an expert, somebody who's able to supply some counseling, coaching, or wisdom, that parties might be able to like see eye to eye. Sometimes a third party could be an arbiter, somebody that if two people are in disagreement and they really just say, yeah, I know I owe you for that. I just don't think it's worth as much as you do. And then the other person says, well, I agree you owe me for it, but I think it's worth more. If they don't reach an agreement, they might be able to reach an agreement on the expert, who would then be able to give the appraisal of the value. And then both parties agree that we'll use this third party to make the determination. And then when that determination is made, then that payment's made. And third parties sometimes might be preferable to not actually be like a court of law, because the person doesn't want it to be a judgment, right? If a judge rules on something and says it was worth this much, it's usually because they're saying that you owe a certain amount, and somebody might not want that on, to impact their credit or something. But again, the role of third party isn't limited to just specific areas. A third party might be able to give the two different parties a better idea about what the laws or the rules at play might be. What are the different variables impacting something? Might be somebody doing an appraisal, right? No help with dealing with the conflict, but just being able to say what the raw facts and figures are on what the damages or dispute ends up being. So different things that third parties can do, right? Again, so if two parties are in disagreement and a mediator gets involved, right? The mediator might be able to see different ways for the parties to be heard, to understand one another. Multi-party negotiations as well could be a mediator or a facilitator who's able to help all of the parties feel heard. The more parties you add to an equation, the more complex it gets. But that doesn't mean that it's not possible to reach some sort of a point of equity where all parties are actually happy. But But frequently, when people are in disputes, they're not able to both advocate for themselves and advocate for others at the same time and make sure that everybody's getting a chance to speak. They're mostly worried about meeting their own needs, not necessarily in identifying the needs of all others. So somebody being in a position where they're able to say, all right, let's make an agenda. Let's make sure everybody's needs are heard, might be all that it takes, right, in order to reach the resolution, right? When they won't play, right, that can be produced for a whole lot of different reasons. So part of the larger strategy here in getting to yes is that they really want to encourage a move away from positional bargaining. So positional bargaining is, again, it's the right and wrong thinking. Like, I'm right and you're wrong. We should do what I want because, and sometimes positional bargaining works, no doubt about it. Two different people have two different proposals, and one's better than the other. Some sort of maybe not so thorough debate might leave them stuck, but eventually some sort of schematic is going to determine what's right or what's wrong, right? And even if the two individuals are in disagreement about it, a boss or a manager or somebody's going to decide like one is better, and that's what they're going to do. There can be right, there can be wrong, right? But frequently, approaching a negotiation or a conflict from the position of right and wrong doesn't help the parties to find a common understanding, a comfortable middle ground, a way to get past a mutually harming stalemate. Looking past the position. This is one of the steps that the authors are really big on here. So there's a position, but why is that position being held? And the more we can come to understand what the values and interests motivating a position are, the more we can think about whether or not we have alternative ways of meeting those needs or alternative ways of fairly responding to what somebody's looking for. Take the used car example, right? I use this as a kind of transactional example regularly, right? You would like to buy a car, somebody would like to sell a car, you have a certain price that you'd like to pay for the car, they'd have a certain price that they'd like to get for it. Now, you might go in as a buyer thinking that something is a completely reasonable price because you've done research on Kelley Blue Book and you know what used car values are. Offering that person the price according to what Kelley Blue Book says couldn't be a pretty fair strategy. The other person may even agree that Kelley Blue Book is a fair source of information and still say no to your offer. And you might think, they won't play. Now, again, that might be fair, but the detail might be that the person agrees that that's a fair price, but they don't want the fair price. They might be of the position that their car is worth more than the Kelley Blue Book for whatever reason. They might feel like they've had it serviced more recently or something, that's not being taken into account. Or it might be the case that they're selling their car because they want to get money for a different purchase that they have to make. And it might be the case that if they don't get what they want for it, selling it doesn't really help them. And so they're trying to make sure that they get a set amount of money in order to make something take place so that they have the liquid capital to facilitate something else. And that might still mean that you don't reach an agreement knowing that they want more money and knowing why they want it. Might only just make it easier for you to figure out that it's time to walk away. But there might be something else that's motivating it, right? If somebody's trying to sell their used car because they need $12,000, right? They're trying to sell their car for $12,000 and they're not budging on the price because that's exactly the amount of money that they need to pay for a medical procedure. It doesn't matter if $10,500 is a fair price. They might even say, like, look, you have Kelley Blue Book and that's a fair price, but I'm trying to raise money. So this is what I have to do. I have to get $12,000. 10,500 won't cut it. But actually, if you know that what they're trying to do is raise $12,000 to pay for a surgery, you may be in the position to say, look, here's what I'm willing to do. I'll buy the car for $10,500 and give you a loan for the $1,500 on top of that so that you're able to have the money that you need for the surgery. The person says, you know what? It could happen, right? It could happen exactly that way. We have expensive medical care in this country. We have people that are in really difficult positions, and the person might say, you know what? That would be great. That would be life-saving, right? Because they're getting the treatment that's being desired. And they might realize, like I said, that that is actually a fair price, but they don't have anywhere else to turn to, right? Going on GoFundMe to try to raise money might not have worked. So this might be the last straw. And so they can't negotiate a cheaper price for the healthcare. They're just hoping to get lucky on the sale of the car. But again, looking behind the position, why is somebody stuck on their position? There might be a reason, and knowing that can present avenues for success. Again, assuming they are honestly trying, right? The person says, I can't go any lower. Ask them, why not? What do you need $12,000 for? What's going on here? The person says, I think it's worth this. Okay. Why do you think it's worth that, right? Let's get to it. Either they're going to change your opinion or not, but you're going to find out where they're coming from. You might find opportunities to say, well, what if I could show you that it's actually not worth that much, right? You might find the inroads. Testing hypotheticals. Somebody's stuck on a position, and you might have the opportunity to say, what if I did this and, right? Another thing that they encourage, and again, I'll say from my experience, as long as people were at the negotiating table, as long as people were at the mediation, they hadn't given up on it, right? Early on, kind of in that part of the career, there were the moments where it seemed like there's no chance here. The people are just not coming to the middle. But they were still at the table because they thought they were still trying. And they were. They wanted to get what was going to help them leave the courtroom happy that day. And they just didn't necessarily know how to get there. And so through the mediation, going through some exploring and fact checking and understanding could frequently be really helpful for parties to understand how things were working, how they'd gotten into positions. And sometimes people who felt like they had an idea about what value was initially would come to see that, oh, actually, okay, there's more going on here than I realized. But again, asking questions, exploring, finding out what's going on for the other party. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with a hypothetical. Hypotheticals could open lots of doors. Like I said, if somebody wants 12,000 and you don't know why, but you know what you think a fair price is, what ifs, right? What if I pay you the fair price and lend you the rest? Would that work? Anyway, there are different ways to proceed, to continue to try and endeavor to reach an agreement and a positive outcome in negotiations, even when it initially seems that the other party won't budge, they won't play. So you can try it. Once you've gone past your threshold, you can comfortably walk away. But the whole point in this idea of having conflict skills is that We don't want to give up because we don't know what opportunities we're missing out on when we give up too quickly, or when we only tried one tool or one strategy and maybe the next one could have been successful. See you in the next one.